Thanks so much. Sorry if I missed it, but I'm interested to hear if there are concrete changes that you're suggesting we make in this capital plan.
I'm suggesting that the amount of money, hundreds of millions of dollars that we're going to spend on housing is more appropriately spent by senior levels of government and shouldn't be a burden to the citizens of Vancouver exclusively. The money that we're spending on that could be used for some of the infrastructure deficit that staff is also telling us exists, where we're underfunded by $500 million a year, it seems. We need to address that issue, put our own house in order before we start expanding out into other areas that are really not the core jurisdiction for the city.
Okay, and where that senior government funding around housing requires partner funding, would you support us just foregoing that senior funding then if we don't have our own municipal funding available to match?
Well, I think there are negotiations involved when dealing with the senior levels of government. We don't need senior levels of government to download their responsibilities onto the city and onto civic taxpayers. I mean, they'll all try it. Everyone tries it, but that's not the way it should be proceeding. We need to, argue back that it's their responsibility fundamentally.
Sure, and I think we all do that. I'm interested then to hear if we aren't funding or contributing some funds to housing solutions, and one of the outcomes is increased street disorder, is your preference that we pay for that out of our operating budget in other policing and BIA supports and other avenues rather than through housing in the capital plan?
Well, so we've had increased funding for civic-driven housing in Vancouver for the last 15 years. We probably have more street disorder in the downtown east side than we've ever had. The proposals being put forward on the Arbutus corridor for the SRO housing that was debated last night and will continue for many more nights.
We shouldn't go to that topic. That's an active public hearing.
It's an active topic, but it's also relevant. People are unhappy with that approach.
Okay, I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Boyle.
Councillor Kirby-Yung has questions for you. Councillor Kirby-Yung.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, you seem to suggest that of the $617 million that's allocated in the plan that we could potentially take half, $500 million or $500 million and reallocate it to other priorities. But the majority of that money for housing is from in-kind. I think 2/3 of it, at least. Majority is from in-kind housing delivery of turnkey units or contribution. So it's not that it's cash in the bank per se. It's actually only 1/6 of that $617 million is city funding, and usually coming through the provision of city land. So I'm wondering why you didn't make note of that in your presentation.
Well, in-kind contributions are still a cost to the citizens of Vancouver. It's not free money just raining down on us. It comes from somewhere. It's a tax on people who ultimately have to buy the properties. It takes away from property that might earn revenue for the city of Vancouver so that it could fund its maintenance programs. It's not just free money.
So you would rather, just to be clear then, just clarify that point, you would rather that we didn't take the in-kind affordable housing and that we just took cash. We didn't take affordable housing, even though that we're hearing that housing is the #1 priority from people, and the city should use its levers and tools to do that without directly spending property taxes per se.
Housing is a priority, but more appropriately dealt with by the provincial government. I'm not suggesting overnight that we take out the $600, $700 million worth of housing allocated. But what I am suggesting is that we're on a slippery slope into a place where we end up with social division and only people who are able to afford the inflated prices of land being able to actually have housing. And then we're left with trying to look after the remainder who cannot afford to buy housing because we've deliberately taken on policies that cause the inflation of the prices of land and property in the city.
Okay, but it is expensive now, so you don't think we should strive for affordability for what we can with the regulatory tools? We should just leave.
We should strive for affordability.
Any kind of, let me just finish the question.
Sorry.
We should just leave any sort of engagement or policy levers just to federal government investment and not use the regulatory tools to get affordable housing. Is that what I'm hearing?
There are tools we can use 100%, but what I'm saying is we have to be conscious of how we also contribute to the inflation in property values. The constant cycle of rezoning of demands for property levies and for community amenities. Those things all contribute to raising costs in the city. We can use other tools at our disposal, but we have to recognize we need to start to back this up before we get into a situation we can't get out of a Gordian knot, so to speak.
Okay, I hear that's loud and clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Deschanel has questions for you.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm not there in person. But I did want to ask you, I mean, Councillor Kirby-Young just followed up one of her questions by asking about regulatory tools. As far as I'm concerned, we're talking about the capital budget. Is that what you're understanding? So what you're talking about, what you see outside of the scope of the city isn't the regulatory tools, it's the investment we'd actually be making in housing beyond even just land. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're talking about the capital budget. I'm talking about the way we've laid it out. There are other tools, of course, at the city's disposal. That's not part of the capital budget.
Okay, and by that, can I ask, and you don't have to answer me, but are you talking about sort of the development of housing?
Well, I wasn't specifically speaking about the regulatory tools. That was Councillor Kirby-Young's question. I don't know which tools she was suggesting we might use. That might
The
help.
development of housing, like, I mean, when we talk about regulatory tools like permitting, licensing, development permits, I see that as regulatory tools that we have to make things more affordable. But we're looking at a capital budget and the millions of dollars in here on housing. Specifically, can you speak a little bit more as to what you shared with us in your presentation that you think might be outside of the scope of our jurisdiction as a city?
Well, housing is a provincial authority as laid out in the Constitution. That's where housing it sits. It doesn't sit with municipalities. Municipalities, provincial governments, and federal governments partner, of course. The feds also weighed in and provide money for housing as well, but strictly speaking, it's not theirs to administer. It's the provinces. So that's where we should be looking for guidance, direction, and in fact, funding for this, rather than taking it to the citizens of Vancouver. And the only way we're trying to cobble together an approach where we find money wherever we can, and that seems to be rezoning constantly to feed a desire for more amenities and more services. And that itself creates discontent in our neighborhoods and in our city. And it creates unaffordability and affects the livability of the city. So that's what I think we're talking about here with this capital plan.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'm just going to go, yeah, thanks. I actually have a question for you just to get it straight. So you're saying in this particular capital plan, we should cut all money that we're dedicating to housing?
I did not say that we should cut all of it, but the last part of my comments were that we have to pass a capital plan. We need to be able to go to the electorate and look for plebiscite funding to fund the 20% that is going to be debt. So I didn't say that we should cut all of that out and completely redo this plan
How
today.
much should we cut of it?
You might want to start with 20% or something like that. See how that works for you.
We should reduce our spending on housing by 20%. That's what you're suggesting we should do.
I'm suggesting we should look at that. You should look at those options. And then you wouldn't have the same need for development amenities, development costs surveys. I mean, we're on a slippery slope here. We're going to a place where we're going to be constantly having to ask developers for money. And it's not developers who are ultimately going to pay for that. It's the citizens, the residents of Vancouver who wish to buy a home. So just adding housing to your budget actually makes it less affordable for the average resident of Vancouver.
And so your solution is not to do that.
My solution is not for the city of Vancouver to be the people that have to pay for that by themselves. It's a provincial responsibility. It's not the city's responsibility to provide that housing.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson, up to 3. Might be on mute, Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, sorry. So, are you running for council?
I have not filed papers to run for council, but I am affiliated with the party and I'm considering that, yes.
So do you know how many homeless people we have in the city?
I do not know the exact number, Councillor. No, I'm sorry.
Do you have a ballpark?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a ballpark number?
10, 15,000? You can tell me better, I'm sure.
Yeah. Do you have any idea what the difference in life expectancy between a homeless person and a housed person is?
I'm sure it's not good.
Do you know that the city has done consultations and polling that says that over 70% of residents want us to spend money on affordable housing and services for people who are homeless?
70% of people want somebody to spend more money on housing. Whether it's the city that does it, the province, or the federal government is a different matter. it's not the city's responsibility to house everybody who arrives here, with due respect,
If-
Councillor.
If the feds in the province refuse to deal with homelessness, do you think we should just let those folks suffer?
I don't think we can let the feds and the provincial government refuse to deal with it. It's an issue that they are partly responsible for. And we've seen from the,
responsible.
sorry.
But how do you get them to do it?
Well, you may know better than I. It sounds like you are an aspiring provincial politician yourself with your agenda, so I would wish you luck in getting them to help.
So are you going to run on a platform of not funding housing and homelessness?
I don't think it's a platform of not funding housing and homelessness. It's a responsible platform of what can this city afford, what should taxpayers legitimately be paying for, and are we actually contributing to an unaffordable city, which is the thing none of us want. None of us want to have an unlivable place where it's too expensive for we and our children and our grandchildren to live. We've got to look at what we might be doing that contributes to that problem. And I think this approach, as evidenced by the essay from Hong Kong, is that dependence on developer contributions contributes to housing unaffordability. And we don't want that.
And spending money to help people who are homeless contributes to unaffordability.
We have to spend money to help the homeless, I'm sure. It's the provincial government's responsibility.
Okay, that's it for me. Thanks.
And thanks for your questions.
That's it for questions. Thanks for coming in and good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you for your time today.